So welcome back to the 365 Pay It Forward talks here in August at Life Coach University. And I will be here every Monday through Friday for the month of August, talking all about my weight loss your way philosophy. And just as a reminder, that your only cost to participate is your promise to pay it forward with some act of kindness. So before we jump in, I wanted to just quickly introduce myself for anyone that may not have joined us last week. But my name is Norma Frahn, and I am a life and health coach for weight loss. And I'm also a 53-year-old woman who, at 49, 50-ish years old, I lost over 100 pounds. And I did it by finally stopping dieting. And I went on to become a life coach for weight loss because I believe so deeply in the process that I learned and then adapted and made it my own. And I just really want every woman who's done with diets to have some place to go to figure out how to lose weight their way. So I'm thrilled and honored to have the opportunity to be here at Life Coach University and sharing this information for the month of August with you. So let's dive into today's topic. It is day 7, and I'm going to be talking to you all about one of my favorite strategies to create almost any change in your life, and certainly the changes that you need to make to figure out how to lose weight your way. And that's tiny actions. Tiny actions can equal big, big results. And weight loss your way is all about creating actions or behaviors that are aligned with your values and your beliefs and your desire to achieve whatever your personal weight goal is. It's all about you and figuring out what works for you. And I believe tiny actions is just a great way to do that. So I'm going to start with one of the biggest misconceptions about weight loss, and that's that we need to make these big, drastic life changes to get the results that we want. And even stranger, I think we sometimes believe that the more drastic and hard these changes are, the better chance we have of this diet working. Have you ever done this? I've even thought things like, well, no wonder those other diets didn't work. They just weren't hard enough. I know that's crazy, right? Just think, I just think there's some combination of hardwiring and social conditioning that's just taught us that the process of losing weight has to be hard and it has to be painful, or it simply isn't going to work. But total myth. Like I said, just a gigantic misconception. And what typically happens when you decide on a diet, usually the first thing we do is that big life overhaul. I'm sure you know what this looks like. You empty out your pantry, you empty out your fridge, you make the big announcement to your family that mom is going on a diet. And then you go out and you buy all the approved food and maybe even a recommended piece of exercise equipment. And all the while, your family's sitting quietly in the background, or maybe not so quietly, waiting for this latest storm to pass. Now, no matter how committed I was at the start of my big life overhaul, it never lasted. It was just too darn hard. Making those big sweeping changes rarely work because you're trying to fit somebody else's process over your life. It's like an analogy that I used last week. It's like walking around in someone else's shoes. It just doesn't feel right. And it may even hurt and give you blisters. And all you want to do is rip them off your feet. These big life overhauls usually require a large amount of willpower that frankly just isn't sustainable for the long term. And we quit. We rip off the shoes and we just quit. And I've done this countless times. Then we start blaming ourselves and beating ourselves up as if there was something wrong with us because we couldn't make this thing work. We couldn't make the shoes fit. It's just a frustrating cycle that you probably have a lot of experience with too. And for that reason, I just want to say again, it's not you. It was the process. I shared this yesterday. It's never a you problem. It's a process problem. But there is a better way. And it's by making small incremental changes that you decide to make because only you know what will work for you. Now, I lost all 117 pounds on the back of very, very small incremental changes. But I wasn't able to do that until I took one really important step. And this is so important. So please hear me on this one. I had to let go of the timeline that I had imposed on myself and decided that the weight loss will take as long as it takes. If there's one thing I want you to take from this talk today, it's that. Try to let go of your timeline to lose weight. It's just not helpful. My first decision was that I wasn't going to change my life overnight anymore, or I wasn't going to try to change my life overnight anymore. I knew that didn't work. And I had lots of proof that it didn't work. And I knew that I couldn't really fully embrace the idea or practice of tiny changes if I was still attached to a buy when date. So, do you know what happened when I made that decision? Everything suddenly felt easier. It was like a pressure valve was released. When I took away the pressure of losing 100 pounds in a year, because that was my goal, that was my self-imposed timeline, and started taking it literally one day at a time, one decision at a time, weight loss became easier. I was able to let myself relax and breathe, and I let go of all the math. Now you know what I'm talking about, the weekly calculation of how much do I need to lose to make that goal, or how much extra do I need to lose to make up for the God forbid gain that happened last week. It's just craziness. That kind of dieting always felt so constricting and suffocating to me. Like I was walking around all clenched up with my shoulders up in my ears and muscling myself through the day, and all the while holding my breath. Every mistake seemed to push me further from that self imposed deadline until my nervous system literally couldn't take it anymore. And I'd quit every time. But take out that time component, and suddenly there's a tiny space to think. And in that space, you start to get some clarity. So here's what I would ask you to do is to spend some time with the idea of releasing that timeline. If you didn't have that pressure, what would you do differently? How would it feel? I had to release my timeline so I could be open to the idea of taking tiny, tiny actions. And I promise this could be the single most freeing thing that you can do for yourself while you're figuring out weight loss your way. All right, so let's jump into the tiny actions and how they fit into creating weight loss your way. You can think of tiny actions as baby steps. Have you ever watched a baby learn to walk? It's absolutely fascinating. My grandson is learning to walk right now, and I love watching. And I know he's not thinking, I've got to figure out this walking thing by next Tuesday. I mean, that's ridiculous. He doesn't have a timeline. He doesn't even know what a timeline is. He's literally taking one baby step at a time. So, what I noticed and what I've been watching is that first he started to pull himself up and start standing. And after a few days, he started to test out his feet and move a few inches while he got clung to the side of the sofa. And then he got brave and let go with one hand and started turning his body around and getting a feel for balance. And now he's letting go with both hands and kind of wobbling back and forth. And after a second or two, he drops down on his butt and then he stands up and starts the whole process over again. And I know one of these times he's just going to surprise us all and just take off walking. That's exactly how tiny actions work. You make one tiny adjustment, and when you're comfortable, you adjust again. Maybe you fall, and that's okay. It's just part of the process. So you get back up, you adjust, and you keep going. It's exactly how tiny actions work. So let me give you a few examples of what tiny actions might look like. You can you should start with a small goal, some action that supports maybe your bigger weight loss goal, but it's not the goal. It's just something simple and doable, like I want to drink more water. So your tiny action might be, I will drink one extra bottle of water or glass of water today, and it will be after I brush my teeth in the morning. Maybe you want to start a journaling habit. Your tiny action might be, I'll set a timer and write for 2 minutes while I have my morning coffee. Another one might be if you want to start a walking habit. Your tiny action might be, I'll walk to the end of the driveway 3 times this week before I eat my lunch. What did you notice about those examples? So, first, there was a trigger in each one. Each one was attached to some small habit that you already have in place and probably do pretty automatically, like after I brush my teeth, or while I have my coffee in the morning, or before I eat my lunch. When you attach a new habit to something you already do almost automatically, it starts to it'll trigger you to do that new behavior. Now, the other thing you might have noticed in these examples is how tiny and doable each one of these actions are. It almost seems ridiculous, right? Like, how in the world can one glass of water or 2 minutes of writing or a 5 minute walk really make any difference? It's probably what you're thinking. That, you know what, this can't possibly be enough, is exactly what's running through your mind, because it was running through my mind when I first learned this. And it will definitely come up when you start practicing tiny actions. And part of that is because we've been hooked by the diet industry on all of these quick fix promises of huge results. And as far back as I can remember, every diet, every program and piece of equipment I purchased did promise some big result in a very short period of time. And usually it required a big life overhaul, like I talked about in the beginning. And if they didn't work, it was always a short-lived process. But weight loss your way is a long game, and creating a process that is sustainable and works for your life requires patience and it requires practice. Sorry about that. I know how desperately you want to lose weight. Really, I do, because I've been there. But the reality is, the quick fix giant overhaul is a fantasy. Figuring out what works for you is a process, and it involves experimenting and giving yourself the time and space to create habits that actually make sense for you. And that's exactly what tiny actions do. Just like my grandson learning to walk, you start with the tiniest of actions. You pull yourself up and you hold on for dear life sometimes. But when you do that and let enough time pass, you start to gain some confidence. You start to believe that you can do it. And when you're ready, you adjust and you take the next step, or you level up. You feel solid in your morning glass of water, so your next tiny action might be drinking 1 glass of water before every meal. Maybe you notice that those 2 minutes of writing in a journal is starting to be really easy and flows well. So maybe now you move to 5 minutes. And that 5 minute walk feels really super easy now. So you move to 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And then just keep going, one tiny action after another. It's doing the action over and over until you master it or have it on lock that creates the confidence you need to move forward. You don't need confidence to go out and do the thing for the first time. You just need to pick something very small and doable, do it, repeat it, and the confidence grows. Those big life overhauls were literally too much too soon. They didn't give your brain any space to even believe you could do it, much less to create the confidence you needed to make the changes sustainable. So tiny actions work because they are doable and repeatable. With every tiny achievement you create, a tiny bit more confidence. And having more confidence is going to allow you to keep going and build momentum. You're training yourself to show up and do what you say you will do. It's like a snowball. It keeps growing and growing, and your results start to compound. Maybe that's a good way to think about it, like compounding interest. Now, I know no one is a fan of compounding interest in our finances, but it's certainly our friend when it comes to creating results with tiny actions. Once you start to gain some momentum, the results begin to compound exponentially. And what's really great, this is not just about weight loss. You can apply the tiny actions technique to any part of your life. It works because it's doable and because you're calling the shots, not someone else's program or process that you're trying to retrofit over your life. You know what you want, and now you get to decide how you're going to get it. you end up creating the changes and the habits that you want in your life, one tiny action at a time. Now, there are a couple of really good books that I can recommend that have helped me kind of refine my process of tiny actions. And the first is Atomic Habits by James Clear. That's a really great book. But my favorite is Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. Both take a deeper dive into the science behind tiny actions, but they do it in a way that's really understandable. So if that's your thing and you really want to kind of dive into what's behind all of this, I invite you to check out both or one of those books. They're just fantastic. So to wrap up, I really want you to think about this. No more big life overhauls. Think tiny and try to separate yourself from this timeline that you've imposed. Give yourself the space to take your time with this. Now, a great journal prompt would be to ask yourself every morning, what tiny action can I take today? That's really going to help you focus in on that one tiny, doable, repeatable thing. And like I said, next, let go of that timeline for weight loss. Clinging to a by when date is going to block you from really experiencing the power of tiny actions. And last, be patient. Be patient. Patience is your friend. Go slow and let the process guide you. You will know when you're ready to adjust and take that next tiny action step. Don't force it. Let the momentum you're creating carry you forward. All right. I hope this made some sense, and we're going to jump over to questions. So let me move my screen a little bit so I can see everything. So first looks like a comment. You gave permission for everyone to let go of shame and blame. Such a breath of kindness in this diet industry. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. That's really my goal. And one of the things that keeps pushing me forward in this work is that I personally lived so many years in shame and blame and guilt, and it's no way to live. And honestly, I didn't even realize that I was doing it. I just thought that's how it was. And when I figured this out and learned that no, you can live your life free of shame and blame, the world opened up to me. And I want to give every woman that wants it the opportunity to experience that. So thank you. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. All right, another comment. I'm going to start the tiny action of saying 3 nice things about myself in the mornings. Oh, that's wonderful. Yesterday you talked about Monday morning beatdown. It seems like I have a morning beatdown on myself every morning. It's so exhausting. I always lose. Yes. Oh my gosh, such a great point. You do. When you're beating yourself up, the only one that's losing here is you. And I'm so happy to hear that yesterday's talk resonated with you and you're taking some tiny actions. And that's beautiful. Saying 3 nice things about yourself every morning is going to be a great practice that's going to literally start to retrain your brain. It's amazing. Stick with that. And I would love to hear how this works for you. So please, yeah, I've mentioned it before. I invite anybody to send me an email and tell me how these things are working out. It's support at normafrahncoaching.com. I would love to hear how your progress goes with this. All right, I have a couple of questions that I get a lot from my clients, and so I thought I'd touch on them real quick here just to help kind of clarify a little bit. And the first one is tiny actions don't seem like enough. And I talked a little bit about this in the beginning. Your brain's going to try to convince you of that. It's going to feel like this can't possibly be enough. This is ridiculous. Again, because we've been trained to think it has to be hard and challenging and painful. But think about it this way. And this was described, I think, in Atomic Habits by James Clear. He used an ice cube as an example. So if you put an ice cube all by itself in the freezer, and your freezer is set at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which is when water freezes. And I apologize, I don't know my conversions. I think it's 0 degrees Celsius. And you just put the ice cube there and let it sit there. It'll never change. It just stays there. But if you turn up the temperature just by 1 degree, one tiny little degree, The ice cube starts to melt just a little bit, and then you turn it up by another degree, and a little more melting happens, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and eventually it just melts. That's just exactly how tiny actions work. One tiny little degree creates an entire molecular change in that ice cube. And one tiny small action in your process could start to create the momentum that you need to keep building on that and turning it up by one more degree and creating more and more and more results. Let's see. So the other one I get is, how can I do this with food specifically? So I've got a great example that I did. I think I might have mentioned this before in one of the other talks, but I was never a person that ate a lot of vegetables. Peas and corn literally were the what I grew up on, and that was my vegetable world. So at some point in my process, I decided I wanted to add more vegetables to meals. So old me would have done the big life overhaul and turned into a vegetarian overnight, but new me, doing tiny actions, knew that I had to take it really small. So I set a small goal for the week that I was just going to add a vegetable to one meal. And that was it. I did that for a while, and then I added a vegetable to two meals. And then eventually I figured out how to eat vegetable even at breakfast. And it just kind of snowballed, and I got a nice variety of vegetables. Now, another great example, this is actually a client of mine that we were working on. She just felt like she just ate so fast that she wasn't able to even get in touch with how she felt while she was eating, when she was full, when she wasn't, the whole thing. So she started these tiny habits to slow down her eating. And the first thing she did, she started eating sitting down. She stopped standing at the counter and eating. Her tiny habit was just, I'm going to sit down at the table to eat my meal. That's it. And then she leveled it up after a week or so. And she decided she's going to sit down and eat undistracted. So no phone, TV, books, or anything. And then she got to a place where she was ready to she kept doing all those things. And then she put her fork down between bites. So she was really able to dial in. So those are just a few examples of how you can do it around food. And then the last thing I'll mention is I wanted to just quickly touch on triggers again, because I get that question a lot. I mentioned how you attach a new habit to a trigger. So basically, like I explained in one of the descriptions, you find something that you already do automatically, like brushing your teeth, and you attach the new habit to that thing, because you're not going to forget to brush your teeth. And then you can tell yourself, when I brush my teeth, I'm going to drink a whole glass of water. So you're using that trigger of that thing that you do already to remind you to do this new habit. It's genius. James Clear in Atomic Habits and BJ Fogg talk about this in their books as well, and give you tons of examples on how to apply this in other places, but truly does work. All right, I think we are through the questions, and I will just close out with just reminding you that, oops, sorry, someone just popped in. This is a great example of a tiny habit. I'm going to have one less bag of chips a day. I usually eat 2 to 4. Beautiful. That is perfect. A perfect example of a tiny action. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, if this really resonated with you today and you got excited about the possibilities of tiny actions, and maybe you want to talk about it a little bit more, all you need to do is just grab a free call with me. Super easy. Go to my website, normafrahncoaching.com, and just hit that big done with diet buttons. And we can talk through any of this and really get you set up with a good plan to start implementing some tiny habits. It is a free call, and I promise you there is no sales pitch around this. I truly just want to help you put these really foundational steps in place so that you can get on with losing weight your way. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for being with me here today and participating in the conversation. And please don't forget, go out in the world today and pay it forward with some act of kindness. All right, we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.